Bill Barber is a legendary figure in Philadelphia Flyers hockey. He played for the Flyers for an impressive 12 seasons in the NHL. During his time there, he made sure to leave his mark on the game. He won 2 Stanley Cups for the Flyers in 2 consecutive seasons in 1974 and 1975. You know, Barber was part of the famous LCB lineup, along with Leach and Clark. This trio was the key to the Flyers' success in the 70s. Their games were legendary, and the Flyers were always a team to watch, no matter who they were playing against. Now, despite being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, Barber faced some criticism from fans. Some thought his aggressive playing style was too risky, especially in a sport like hockey where injuries are common. But hey, that's just how the game was back then. The Broad Street Bullies era was all about toughness and physicality, and Barber was a part of that. But let's not forget, the LCB trio was still a force to be reckoned with. They led the Flyers to victory after victory, and that's what mattered most. And guess what? Those victories paid off when they won 2 Stanley Cups in 1974 and 1975. Bill Barber was born in Clander, Ontario on July 11, 1952. His family was a big hockey fan, and his dad was the one who introduced him to the game. All the men in the Barber household were passionate players, and they loved playing for fun. Barber's dad always reminded him of the basics of the game, but he also made sure he never forgot that hockey should be fun, no matter how he played it. Growing up, Bill Barber was a hockey fanatic. His dad made sure he had everything he needed to play the game. They even built a practice rink in their backyard so the Barber kids could practice in a proper environment. The Barber kids got the best training possible. Bill Barber had a successful junior career with the Kitchener Rangers. He started making a name for himself on the field and caught the attention of NHL teams. This led to his draft into the NHL in 1972 for the Flyers. In his first season with the Flyers, Barber scored an impressive 30 goals and 34 assists. He was a strong contender for the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year. This made him a popular player among fans, rivals, and management. Barber stayed with the Flyers for over 12 seasons, but his best season came in the 1975-76 season. He scored an amazing 50 goals and 62 assists in just one season. That's one of the highest scoring rates for that season. Barber wasn't just a great player in the NHL. He also played for the Canadian team in the 1976 Canada Cup. In the final against Czechoslovakia, Barber scored a goal that sent the game into overtime. This helped Canada win the tournament and make Barber a hero in Canadian hockey. Bill Barber was a star player for the Flyers when they were the best team in the league. In the 1979-80 season, they had an incredible 35-game winning streak. They were the only team in the league that didn't lose a single game. Bill Barber even became the captain of the Flyers in the 1981-82 season. Everyone in the hockey world knew how talented Bill Barber was. He was a true legend of the game. After the 1984-85 season, Bill Barber retired from playing because of a serious knee injury. He couldn't play the way he used to, and he decided to hang up his skates. But even though he was out of the game, Bill Barber's legacy lived on. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1990, and his achievements were immortalized for all to see. Even after he retired from playing, Bill Barber couldn't stay away from hockey. He became a coach, helping the Hershey Bears and the Flyers win championships. He even helped the Phantoms win their first Calder Cup. Bill Barber's coaching career was a huge success, and he proved that he was just as good as a player as he was a coach. After his coaching career, Bill Barber became the director of player personnel for the Tampa Bay Lightning from 2002 to 2008. He then returned to the Flyers in 2008, where he's been a scouting consultant ever since. Bill Barber's determination and grit were legendary, and he always managed to get his team out of tough situations. His teamwork with other star players, especially the famous LCB formation of the era, was what helped the Flyers win so many championships. In the 1974 and 1975 seasons, the Flyers won the Stanley Cup, and Bill Barber's name was all over the place. He was a true hockey icon, and his legacy will live on for generations to come. Most of the criticism against Bill Barber centered around the reasons mentioned earlier. People didn't think he was as good a player as the other Hockey Hall of Fame inductees. They said he didn't score 500 career goals and played in the shadow of other greats like Bobby Clark and Bernie Parent. They also thought his career took off because he was friends with Clark and Leach, and without them, he wouldn't have been as successful. These arguments were used whenever people talked about whether Barber should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. But despite all the haters, he eventually made it in the 90s. Even though Barber didn't win any individual awards like Richard Martin or Steve Shutt, his teammates and coaches still think he was the best all-around left winger in the league. They say he never missed a game or practice and always put the team first. That might not have made him a star player, but it helped the Flyers win multiple Stanley Cups. Barber wasn't as good an offensive player as some of the other left wingers in the league, but he always focused on defense. That meant he didn't get as much media attention as other players, but it showed how much he cared about his team. In the old days, defense was just as important as offense, maybe even more so. When a team formed a wall against their their opponents, it showed them how weak they were against their home team. Players like Bill Barber showed their opponents exactly this and made sure the Flyers wouldn't let anyone through. Bill Barber was a force to be reckoned with on the ice. He was like a sniper, using his speed and strength to charge right into the middle of the opposing team. Once he got there, he'd unleash his sniping skills, quickly getting in and causing chaos for the Flyers. Many players would try to go it alone, trying to make a name for themselves. But Bill Barber was different. He was all about teamwork. He'd pass the puck to his teammates, showing his dedication to the team. Bill Barber was a favorite among his coaches, Fred Shero, Bob McCammon, and Pat Quinn. They loved how he played, following their instructions to the letter. He missed games and was always the most consistent one at practice. All these habits made him the perfect team player, and that's why he was so successful. Bill Barber was a one-of-a-kind player. He couldn't be replaced because of his selflessness and determination. And when he teamed up with his LCB partner, the Flyers knew they had something special. They used this pairing all the way to the Stanley Cup. But there's one other thing that people always talk about Bill Barber: diving. He was one of the first players to dive in the league. Nowadays, diving is all the rage, but back then, it was a risky move. Bill Barber knew it, but he did it anyway, and it paid off. Bill Barber is often credited with popularizing this tactic in the game. He used it during his time as a player for the Flyers, and it became so successful that other players started using it too. Eventually, it was common for players to dive to get a free penalty. While this tactic was useful on the field, it's been criticized by players and officials because it can be deceptive. It's not considered a test of skill or a sign of good sportsmanship. Lying to referees to get a free penalty was a big deal that brought down the standard of the game. It's not something that's encouraged or rewarded anymore. The league had to come up with new rules to stop players from diving. Many people blame Barber for the sudden increase in diving, but he was just doing what he thought was best for his team at the time. He knew it was a dirty trick, but it worked for him. The Flyers won Stanley Cups in 1974 and 1975, and Barber's methods helped them do it. Barber's style of hockey is the most raw and unfiltered version of the game you can see anywhere. It was a game where aggressive plays were encouraged and rewarded, and players did everything they could to win. It was a team sport, not an individual sport. This kind of play is not as common today, and it's not talked about as much. But people still appreciate Barber's plays and his entire career for playing this way. They want to see a return to this style of hockey. Bill Barber, though not the most famous player in the LCBN, was a true team player who always put his team first. He led the Flyers in the 80s and was a senior player who inspired his teammates. But he also had his moments, like his rough style of play and diving, which some people didn't like. But no player is perfect, and that's what makes hockey so exciting, even for the best players.